Hey there, intro. We're gonna talk about cylinders today. Um, you can't draw cylinders before you understand something about your eye level, so that's why we do it after perspective. Um, you don't have to start drawing yet. Just watch what I'm doing here. So if this is my eye level here, and I'm looking at a cylinder, say this can of El Pato hot tomato sauce, and if that's below my eye level, and my eye level would actually be probably closer to about here. If it's below eye level, it means we can see a little bit of the top. And the further we get from eye level, the more we can see at the top. You see what's happening there? Stay in focus. Okay. Fix that. And if we bring it back to eye level, we're going to see less and less of the top. And if it's above eye level, it's going to start curving the other way. So, when we're drawing a cylinder, therefore, assuming we're looking down on it, we're going to have two kinds of ellipses. We're going to have one ellipse that's very skinny, relatively skinny, and then we're going to have two vertical sides, and then we're going to have another ellipse that is relatively kind of fat or rounded because it is a little further from eye level. Now the closer you are to the cylinder, or the larger the cylinder is within your field of view, the more extreme these effects are going to be. So you're going to notice if I put this can here, the difference between this curve and this curve does not look too great. However, if I move my camera down, so it's much closer to the can, like this, and then you're going to notice that it's closer to what I drew. You see that? So this amount of curvature down here is a lot of curvature, and this curve here is relatively flat. Hopefully that makes sense. So, the reason this is something I emphasize is because almost every beginner does it the other way around. Almost every beginner does a cylinder the way they think a cylinder should look, which is they think, well, cylinders have a round top. They look at the top. And they are flat on the ground if they're sitting on a flat surface. So they therefore draw the top way too round, and hopefully they know to draw the sides straight up and down. And then they draw the bottom flat. This is the way every little kid draws a cylinder. It's the way you think of it. Here's the flat table. There's the sides. There's the round top. Completely wrong, right? And in between, when you start to realize what you're seeing but you don't understand it yet, what you'll do is you'll make the top just a little too flat, too fat, I mean, and you'll make the bottom just a little too flat, like that. So that's sort of in between the correct cylinder here and the totally wrong cylinder here. And I see a lot of these, okay? And the way you want to check your work is you say, okay, this looks not too bad, but what happens if I complete this ellipse at the bottom? And if I complete it, if I make a curve that mirrors the curve at the bottom, and then I can see that this distance x is a lot smaller than this distance y, when in fact it should be greater. And another way you can check to see if you did it the wrong way around is just take your drawing and invert it and erase this portion instead. And then you'll see that it looks a lot better. Right? Okay, so now it's time to get your paper and your pencils out. So here's an actual photograph of a cylinder. And we're going to begin by doing a little measuring. We're going to take a look at this distance here, and we're going to compare it to this distance here. Now, if you want, you could measure the way artists do, like this. Close one eye. Allow the tip of your pencil to line up with the top of the line, and move your thumb until it's lined up with the bottom of the line, and then go the other way and count. And doing it that way, I get about a 1:3 ratio of vertical to horizontal. I'm going to double check though with an actual ruler to make sure that, because that's slightly crude the way I just did that. So hang on a sec. And measuring it that way, I get a ratio of about 2:7. So that means that the vertical dimension is, this vertical dimension is slightly less than a third of the horizontal dimension. So when we're drawing, we're going to try to keep that ratio in mind. Ellipsis is all about ratios. So you're going to draw this with me, and you're going to attempt to draw the same ratio that you see in the photograph, but then you're going to check your work with a piece of scrap paper. And you can do it, it's really this easy. Take any piece of scrap paper, measure your height, and then check it. 1, 2, 3, and about a half. So that was pretty good. I've been doing this for a long time. The important thing for you is to realize that anytime you draw an ellipse, you are free to do what I just did and measure it for yourself. And if you measure it immediately, you will rapidly get better at drawing correct ellipses, because you'll get that instant feedback. And that's really, really important. Otherwise, you just get more and more entrenched in your mistakes. So now I'm going to pull some verticals down. And again, you should be doing this with me. Make sure they're exactly straight up and down. And then it's a good idea to measure the height of the cylinder compared to the width. So I'm going to give you the answer now. That was about 7 centimeters of width, and it's about 10.5. So that means it's about approximately 1.5 times taller than it is wide. So we take this. Imagine this is just swinging around, which hitting right there. Let's see, so this and this are equal. And then you add another half of that, so you get 3 units going down, and that's about how tall it should be. This is what I call fractional thinking, and it is the essence of all good drawing, is to just be constantly talking to yourself this way about what you're seeing. So that gets us to here. And guess what? This ellipse, like I said, is going to be longer, fatter than this one. It has to be. Now, I don't know if I got it exactly right. I obviously can't see the back of this ellipse, so how would I know? Well, what I'd have to do is look for where the verticals sort of bottom out. So if I take this vertical, it ends here. And I take this vertical, it ends here. It should be right across from the other one. So that means the width of that bottom ellipse is like that. And that means that this distance here should be about the same as this distance here. So maybe even a little taller. So that means that bottom ellipse would be, sorry, about like this. And that's looking approximately like what I drew. Looks like I probably made it just a little too fat. Now, if you have a nice single light source like we do here, there's another way you can check that, which is if you continue this shadow edge, it should just touch the outside of that curve in the same way that this shadow edge touches the outside of that curve. So that's very helpful for drawing our shadows. And once you've done that, you might ask yourself, what exactly is this shape, the end? And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that what they're seeing there is another circle. So if I use my tablet for a second, I can draw better. So they think they're seeing, hang on. They think they're seeing just a circle here. Okay, but that does not look very good. So it looks flat. So let me erase that. And I'll put these lines back in. And what we are seeing here is actually another ellipse. You see that? If you draw it like an ellipse, it's going to lay flat on the table for you. See how much better that looks? Now notice that light source is very close to this cylinder, so this ellipse here is a little smaller than this one here. These red lines are diverging a little, but it's not a big deal. So back to our little drawing, we're just going to have to draw this other ellipse here. And there it is. Notice finding the form shadow edge on this is really easy because wherever this line hits this ellipse is where it starts. And then we just have to go straight up. Boom, like that. And we clean up our construction lines. And it's time to shade. So I'm going to do right-handed shading this time. It's been a while. First shading. Now some of you are doing your first shading in big zebra stripes. It's not right. It should look like this. You're just laying in a tone. It should look like a tone. Some people are still smudging. That's not right either. Smudging grinds the graphite into the texture of the paper and creates a look that is not what we're trying to achieve here. So you want to avoid that temptation too. You're just trying to lay a nice even tone using the most natural direction of your hand. Like that. Then, just like with spheres, we erase shadow edge there. Erase this one. And now we start some curved shading. And look how nicely this works out, because we want this edge up here to be sharp. Guess what? We're already curving our lines in a nice sharpening direction. And notice as we move down towards this fatter ellipse, our curves are going to get a little bit rounder. Now that is not something that you will be able to do right away with ease. It takes some practice. Nobody ever taught me how to do this. I learned it looking at old master drawings. The first time I really noticed what they were doing, I was frankly somewhat amazed. How could they control their shading direction like that? But I guarantee you, it becomes second nature after a while. And that's when it gets fun. Now, if you recall from spheres, we were seeing a lot of reflected light when we were drawing spheres. Now we're not seeing much reflected light. And that's because the table, there's no surface on a cylinder that that leans down towards the tabletop. So there's no, you might sometimes get a little bit of reflection right near the table, right in here, but not much. Notice also that by doing this shading direction like this, I haven't been able to sharpen this edge. And in order to sharpen it, I need to do some straight up and down lines. And I also knocked a few little stray shading lines over that edge because I was doing it with my right hand. clean those up. Now I'm going to clean up the annotations over here. Huh, that's funny. Oh, maybe I gotta do it over here. Okay. And we're gonna zoom in a little onto the shadow. And remember, we're always asking ourselves, whenever we see an edge, we're asking ourselves, why can I see this edge? Because if the values are the same, guess what? You can't see it. So notice when I zoom in, there is really no edge right here. It's just sort of up at the top there. And there's very little edge showing down here. The edge gets really clear right here at the bottom. So how are we going to do that? Let's start with going really dark right under here. And transitioning into horizontal because we're on the ground, remember? Always get in the habit of shading horizontally when you're on the ground. And notice when I do this edge, I'm just shading right across the edge. I don't care. Why not? Because this edge really is hard to see. So if I make it easy to see in my drawing, I've failed. So for now, I'm just shading right across this edge. And then I'm going to do just a little more sharpening up and down strokes in here to bring that out. Why don't I zoom in so you can see this as well. And this got a little wonky, so I'm just going to bring that edge out a little. And that's pretty much it. You see what's happening? We get this beautiful transition from dark against slightly lighter here to light against slightly darker here. And that's the kind of sophistication that a beginning drawing is never going to have. So if you can achieve that, that's an accomplishment. Now I'm just going to zoom out a little so we can look at the rest of this cast shadow. And that's needs to be a little darker. We're having that same thing we talked about last time of sort of two levels of darkness. There's the center shadow and then the sort of secondary shadow. Now if you feel like trying to draw that, more power to you, but it's not essential. It is kind of a nice trick to know how to do. When I knock that in. See, I'm just pressing a little harder and I'm going inside that shape like that. And finally, since we're stuck here on white paper instead of gray paper, we need to account for this difference here, which again, if we zoom in, is not much. See that? The closer you get, the more you realize, like, wow, these values are basically the same here. So don't overdo it. What we can do is just very, very lightly bring, this is called a halftone again. part of the way around. But you want your halftone to merge not with the shadow, right? We want it to merge with the light. So you have to use a lot of restraint when you shade your halftones. And if this was on gray paper, we would erase this line and put a little white line there instead. But we don't have that option, so we're going to leave that alone. Okay. We're going to draw one shape that's harder, but I'm going to make that another video. So stay tuned.